can't manage what you don't measure. And so like measuring those things helps you illuminate like where you have issues or like where there are things that you could get better at, because there's always something to get better at.
Welcome to Build Your Culture Brand with Dr. Jay Rains. As leaders, you have the ability to design and lead culture intentionally. Hear from culture leaders who are moving from a values list to values lived.
Hey leaders, welcome back to the Build Your Culture Brand podcast. I have with me today Jordan Annis from reShift. Welcome to the show, Jordan.
How's it going, Jay?
So good to see you. I met you just a couple of months ago, and we've just kind of immediately, there just seemed to be a friendship that just ignited right there. I enjoyed getting to meet you at a conference and hear about your work. And we've had a few talks since then. I was like, man, we just got to have you on the show. I want to highlight what you're doing with teams around the country. And so welcome to the show, and would love to hear your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really excited to be here. Really excited to just chat a little bit about leadership.
Absolutely. Well, I thought it'd take just a second to help you explain, what is reShift, and I want people to hear about reShift and what it can do for an organization, especially. I know it's especially helpful in QSR environments. I know you're working with a few Chick-fil-A's to help them. And so tell us a little bit about, like, you've created this app that's been super useful, saved teams a lot of money and time. What does reShift do?
Yeah. So reShift is a team management app for, like you say, QSRs. We work with a lot of Chick-fil-A's, restaurants in general. It's a team management app that helps save you time as a restaurateur, as an operator. Our goal is to save you and your team time. It kind of hits three different components of the restaurant. Like the first one, and how we got started, is in kind of the compliance world, with tracking breaks, break attestations, things like that. And then the other two areas we kind of cover are operations, and we're starting to move into like team training. So finding those like three areas of the team management in your restaurant. And we have just like key things that in each of those areas that we are automating. And, the goal is to raise your productivity as a restaurant so that you can go and serve guests. We know like everyone in the restaurant is really busy, and the goal is to serve guests. And so like our whole mission is to, automate those things that are maybe paper processes or things like that, so that you can go in and focus on people. Cause that's the business, you go into when you're in the restaurant world. So yeah.
What a great app. Thanks for sharing that. One of the things I like to do just to kind of get to know you, and we'll have some other get to know you questions, but just for fun, if you were to kind of talk to the people right around you, maybe your team, people that you work directly with, and you were to ask them, hey, what do you see as my leadership superpower or my leadership kryptonite? What would be those answers from them?
Yeah. It's I feel like that's a really, really fun, interesting question and conversation to have. Over the years and doing leadership, I think one of the big items for me that I would say is like a superpower is my ability to kind of like get momentum and communicate with the people around me and the people that I'm leading. That's always kind of been one of those superpowers, and being able to just like communicate the vision, communicate like what I'm trying to do, what we're trying to like move towards. And it's funny, I was kind of thinking a little bit about the Kryptonite idea, and like what is my Kryptonite? And I'm sure you have a similar problem as a leader and as someone who's like building his business, is sometimes I just want to do everything under the sun and just want to build this thing as big as possible. I want to add every feature. I want to, talk to every single person. And so sometimes like not getting clear about what the vision is and like what we should be doing. I working on a 2025 strategy for the business and the company. And, I am trying to run it through rigorously and make sure I'm like crossing out things where I'm like, I don't know if we're going to be able to do that this year. Like, let's get like really like clear. And, I don't know. I'm curious, like,
Oh
what
man.
your experience with that is.
Yeah, I'm all over the map. So I'm like trying to do all the things. And so it is. I actually did I think you saw the
Yeah.
process I was going through a couple weeks ago where I had every idea on we have a 9-foot island in our kitchen.
Oh
And
my gosh.
it's where we live, we eat, everything is there. And so I took butcher paper, I covered the whole thing and broke it down into, okay, if I'm dreaming, like what all are we doing? What all could we do? And to put it all out. So still sorting through that, but I'm realizing I took some other, the other, like a bookmark tag, like something you might
Okay.
tag a
Yeah.
textbook with.
Yeah.
So I picked a certain color for me and I just started tagging all the things that I'm actually doing. And it was overwhelming. It's like, wait a minute, this is not sustainable. So yes,
Yeah.
I'm with you
Yeah.
on that and happy to show that process to anybody. And, I know you and I talked about that a little bit. So yeah, I'm that way.
Yeah, it's funny. I have like a document for the year that I'm like writing everything I want to do through. And the other day I threw it, I don't know if you're familiar with ChatGPT. I think most people are. I threw it in ChatGPT and I was like, ask me the hardest questions you can about my strategy for the year. And it's like, why are you doing too much and things like that. And so,
Wow.
it's fun to, get drilled with a bunch of questions.
Use that AI brain against you
Yes.
and for you, right?
Yeah.
And against you. Jordan, it's so great to have you here. And one of the things that I've been fascinated with is your founder journey. I'm a founder too. It's interesting how we, this entrepreneurial journey that you and I are both on and just learning this world of entrepreneurship. What were some of those key moments that moved you in that direction where you thought, you know what, I want to dive in?
Yeah, it's funny. So I studied marketing at Azusa Pacific University. So I wasn't really in technology. I wasn't, now I'm in technology. I wasn't, I was trying to go into like event marketing. After I graduated school, I worked at a church for a little bit, and then I fell into a tech startup. They just needed people to work for them. And I started a job working with designers, developers, the whole works in like the technology world. And as I was starting that, I always kind of knew I wanted to start a business one day. And that was just kind of always in the back of my mind, and falling into the startup kind of got me to get more excited about that idea.
Wow.
And kind of working for these startups, one of the biggest hardships I had in all of that was I've never been that detail oriented. I kind of was a marketing major. I probably wasn't the best student. And I just really didn't have that like detail orientedness in my repertoire. And so I was kind of working for these startups. I went to a startup that I thought, yeah, this is the place. Like I got to sit across from the CEO every single day. It was in the sports technology world. I really thought like I'm going to be here up until I start my first business. And I just felt like it was like the right opportunity to learn a bunch. And kind of as I was there for a year. And then the COVID-19 pandemic hit and I was actually laid off, like right as everything started.
Wow.
And that kind of, looking back, that feels like a failure, or looking back at the time, I thought that was a failure. And kind of looking back now, I'm like, oh, that was just a blessing in disguise.
Sure.
And so I was laid off, and one of the like big pieces of advice that I had gotten from a boss of mine is like, if I want to start a business, I need to be a little bit more detail oriented, and being able to like, especially in the technology world where there's coding and things like that, like I need to be able to, hold my own in all of that. And so, I just took some time off and was like, I'm going to teach myself how to code. And mind you, I am not detail oriented at all.
Wow.
And so I spent maybe a few months YouTubing my way through. I was trying to build like a fitness app at the time. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to start a business, I'm just going to start doing it right away. And so I was trying to build a fitness app, taught myself how to code through YouTube. And, in all of that, kind of just proved to myself, like, you can really learn anything if you just put your mind to it. And like, the ultimate goal here was to like start something. And so fast forward a few, maybe 9 months to a year later, a friend came to me that owns and operates Chick-fil-A. And he was just talking to me about some of the paper processes they had around tracking breaks. I'm out here in California, so tracking breaks is a big deal.
Yeah.
And so, from everything I learned to code, I had built him an app that, automated some of that break tracking for him. And, that's how I kind of got started in getting into this whole restaurant technology world.
Being an entrepreneur, I think the ultimate definition, the ultimate kind of framework of the mind of an entrepreneur is find a problem in the world and solve it.
Yeah.
I mean, 100%. That seems to be like baseline goal for most entrepreneurs. And so, and then there may be other motivations, in there, but that seems to be, and that's exactly what you did. I mean, you literally had this friend come to you with kind of a paper problem, a bureaucracy problem that he was having to sort through, and you eliminated a bunch of that friction for him. So now, is that how reShift started? Was that the kind of the inception of reShift?
Yeah. It really, honestly, it started with the spreadsheet that I built for him. So it started with just kind of a automated spreadsheet that calculated those breaks, and then it turned into the reShift app. Breaks and compliance. I talked at the beginning here about, we're compliance, operation, and training, and we've built a lot more features, but that first like compliance feature was, we calculated it was saving him like 30 minutes. It was saving his managers about 30 minutes every day after we had just automated that one process. And so that was something we were like, okay, we can automate this so your managers can go lead your team members and serve your guests, and
get back to doing the mission they're on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's so good. Yeah. Wow. Jordan, I love that picture of you saying, we figured out how to basically give them back 30 minutes of their time, and put them back with the people they're working with on the mission they're on 30 more minutes. And so, it sounds like it really impacts this idea of productivity. What are some other ways that, you're really trying to tackle productivity? I know you're working now into operations and maybe eventually in training too. So what are some of those productivity targets you're looking at?
Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of operations at a lot of restaurants, there's a lot of different tasks you need to do in the restaurant. I'd kind of touched on, like, we are in an operation, so we have a whole checklist component of the app where checklists appear every day. You can create your own checklists, and you can give those and assign those to shift leads, team members to go and do. The idea here is, if you can't manage what you don't measure. And so one of the things with these checklists is you can go and assign them to a shift lead, a team member, and you can track which ones they got done and which ones they haven't gotten done. Through our reports, we have a whole like leader portal that they can go into. And the idea here is like having a restaurant that's operationally excellent and consistent every single day, and having those checklists is really kind of the that's the thing that gets that going, and making sure that is your restaurant is consistent every day, and like measuring out every single thing you need to do. And so that's kind of one way that we're moving towards operations in the restaurant.
Well, I mean, just there, right there, you know, kind of to put it in perspective, you know, I'm coaching these leaders that you're working with too,
Yeah.
in a way, and we're coaching them on productivity. We're encouraging them to have checklists. You're providing a way for them to have that. One of the things I'm noticing too is my team and I, as we're coaching leaders, we might be coaching, say, the operator, or a few of the directors, and maybe even down a third level. But then that second and third level, they're trying to activate everyone in the organization to take ownership of a piece of the business, right? And so these checklists, I love how, you know, think about a high level leader in an organization like that. You can actually put a person's name on a checklist, and that
Yeah.
person's name, their checklist lives, you know, every day, week, month. But at the level you're talking about, this is role specific. So it might be that so and so's on the shift this day and they're in that checklist spot. That's going to change later on today. That's going to
Yeah.
change tomorrow. So I love how you can easily make it role specific and quickly assign a checklist, because let's face it, the most important things to get done in a day are at the most granular level. I
Yeah.
mean, so helping them get it down to those those
Yeah.
what might seem like minor things, but they have to get done, and it could cause a failure for the whole organization on, say, an inspection or inaccuracy or a truck order. So many things that have to get done, and so that's amazing. I love how you've gotten that to make it easier for productivity.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a piece here of ownership and being able to assign that to that person, so they know, like, hey, this is the thing that I am working on today, and they can have that sense of, like, when you put someone's name on something, they're gonna, like, make sure it
Yeah.
gets done because it's under their name. When it's broad, like, the team needs to get this checklist done, I think you have a better shot of, like, getting things done when there's ownership on, like, specific
Yeah,
actions in the
it's that
restaurant
whole
to do.
thing. If everybody's responsible, no one's responsible.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. For real.
right. And so putting
Yeah.
up one person's name on it, and what does that do for that individual, especially if they're kind of an emerging leader and that maybe they haven't experienced leadership as much. And so for them to have their name on something and know that, hey, this is on my shoulders like this, I can shepherd this to the end,
Yeah.
and it's accomplishable. It's in a checklist. And if I have trouble, I know who to go to. But these 8 things I need to do by the end of the day.
Yeah.
So love how you really set them up for success is really what you're doing with your checklist.
And I was just gonna say, like, I was talking to an operator just a year or two ago, and they had an emerging leader that wanted a raise and wanted to kind of be at that next level of leadership. And his first question to this leader was like, okay, like, what are you doing now that is what that next job is supposed to do? Like, show me what you're doing. And I think, like, the cool thing with, like, assigning these checklists and having kind of your name associated to, like, operational items in the business, you can go to, as an emerging leader, you can go to that operator, you can go to your, like, director and say, like, hey, these are the things I've done. Like, I have proof,
Yeah.
like, I can show you, like, my checklists are 100% every week for the past 3 months. Like, I'm getting these things done. And so I think it's, as an emerging leader, as you're trying to, like, grow in more and more ownership, like, being able to have something substantial to be like, this is what I'm doing to, you know, prepare me for that, like, next level. And I think I'm ready. And so,
I love that. I love that. It's like I'm able to prove dependability, consistency, ownership. Let me ask you, Jordan, and there's a lot of definition in this word. This word's catching a lot, but give me a slice of how would you define ownership? Just that huge
yeah.
word. What's one area of ownership that you're talking about?
Yeah. I think, you know, I think ownership is doing everything in your power to get something done, or everything you can do in that day um, that's in your power. Like, obviously, if you're leading a team, if you're leading an organization, or if you're leading like just a small piece of the business, you can't control everything. You can't control how many customers come to your restaurant. Like, there are things that are, maybe if you're in marketing, you can like help control that, but there are a lot of things out of your control. And so I think like owning that function or that piece of the business is just doing all of those things that are in your power that'll help lead you and set you up for success, um,
That's so good.
in a daily basis. I'm curious, like what's your definition of ownership?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm what you're saying, I mean, fits right in with what we're thinking about ownership. It is such a big word that we've had to work,
Yeah.
like we've got an entire half of what we do is about ownership. So there's just a lot packed in there. But I think there's a couple of different ways to look at it. Like you're saying, it could be a checklist, and I like how you're talking about how it's within my control. Like I'm able,
Yeah.
like I can take ownership because I have the ability, I have the influence in this area. And so it could be a checklist kind of thing. Another thing I've noticed is that ownership could be a space. It's
Mm,
like
okay.
from that post to that post in the drive-through, you own that. And here's what
Yeah.
ownership looks like in this physical space. So physical space, a role space. And so in a role, it might be like especially a checklist kind of thing. And I think ultimately, another way to say what you've just said is well, I like to say, when you put your head on your pillow at night, when you clock out of your shift,
Yeah.
can you say, I won today? How do you describe winning today? And so to be able to know that, for them to be able to know that they won, I mean, isn't it terrible when you don't really understand your role completely, and it's not really clear what you should have gotten done. And in fact, there's various opinions maybe coming at you of, this person thinks I should have done these things and this other person that. But to
Yeah.
have it very clear that, hey, I know that if I do these 7 things on a shift, I'm winning, our team is winning, the organization is winning, we're on mission, we're moving the football forward on the field because I did my part. And so
Yeah.
that's a piece of ownership. The other way, I'll go a little deeper on that,
Yeah.
as we talk about ownership, is ownership doesn't always necessarily mean I do the things.
Yep.
In certain aspects of ownership, especially in leadership, I talk about them owning the strategy for
Yeah.
that piece of the business, own the strategy, and own the metrics. So owning the
Mm,
strategy and owning the data of, okay, so food safety.
yeah.
What do I own the strategy? Here are the 7 things that we know have to be done every week for us to win. So I think what you're providing is that data
Yeah.
of, did it get done? When did it get done? Was it consistent? If I see a gap, now I know where to go to narrow down that gap and maybe coach that person
Yeah.
or encourage them, or maybe my checklist isn't very clear and I need to do a training around
Yep.
this piece of the checklist. So that's where I find our
Yeah.
roles really fitting together in when it comes to something like ownership.
Yeah, I'm honestly, just to like even ask a deeper question here, like how, working with clients, like how do you teach ownership? Like, I'm in the camp that I believe every single person in the world can be a leader. Like, I've grown up in that, like that's what I believe. And like how, so I don't think it's in it, I think maybe there's some natural like innate leadership abilities, but I think everyone can become one. Like, how do you teach ownership? Like, how are you teaching your clients like that, an emerging leader that's trying to
Oh,
learn that?
wow. Yeah, I'll pick one. So we have several tools that we use for leaders to kind of evaluate themselves. How am I as an owner, leader? And then how do I transfer that knowledge and skill and soft skill, hard skill to that next person so that they can feel ownership of whatever that task is. So we have some, what we call a mentor model that we use for that. It's probably too much to dive into on this call. But one that I've developed recently, super simple. And so you can use this right now. I'm putting out there for the world. I call it the ownership timeline. And it's, to me, it has there's three levels of ownership within that timeline. So you think about a line with arrows on the end and then a mark in the middle. That's the whole timeline. In the middle, I put the word now. To my left, I put the word past, and to my right, I put the word future. And so as I sit down with a leader, or as I teach this to a leader to use with their team, I'll say, what does now leadership look like? Now ownership. Now ownership means, man, I jump in, man, I solve problems right now. I've got energy, I'm engaged now. And that's what I call level one ownership, where someone's just, they're all in, and they're all in the moment. You can depend, they're dependable in the now space, right? So like 5 minutes past, 5 minutes forward, kind of in that right now. But then that's level one. Then I begin to challenge, well, what does level two ownership look like? And that to me is more looking into the past. Okay. The last 10 minutes, the last hour, the last day, the last week. And that line gets longer. And so you can't expect a new leader to be a month back, maybe, but can they reflect on this morning when we're talking to them this afternoon? Can they own up to a moment of, wow, I see now, I could have done that different, and like actually take ownership of that little bit of the past that they, like you said, they have influence on. Can they even think like that? And so that takes some growth for someone to get to level two ownership. So maybe we get them to a shift back, right? And then level three ownership is, can they take that and now do something in the future different? So that's level three. Are they like now thinking ahead and like, okay, what I'm going to now strategize about tomorrow's shift or my next shift, and I'm going to come in different when that problem arises. Or so, and then the growth area is, okay, if I can think a shift back and a shift forward, can I think a day back and a day forward, or a week back and a week forward? And so expanding that ownership timeline is really that kind of maybe a fourth level. I don't know if there's 4 levels of ownership, but
yeah, that's cool. I think, as I've grown in my like leadership, I've gotten really into, I'll like journal, and by journal, I mean, I'll type on a Word document on my computer to like reflect back on things I've done and like kind of pull out those action items. And so, yeah, I've never heard it in the levels before. That's a really cool, really cool way to like build that out.
Well,
Think about it.
maybe I'll have to make it into a book someday, but it's been really powerful to help people kind of, because this whole idea of ownership, again, it's just such a big word. Like, how do we get some practical thoughts around it? But I like what you're doing, because you're really helping on really all 3 of those levels. You're helping someone know right now, how do I take ownership?
Yep.
You're also helping them to reflect back over the last weeks or months and say, well, here are some misses. Why did those misses happen? What was going on there? What could I do different? And then, or maybe redo our checklist because those are, need to be improved. And then how do we strategize to own next week or next month or next year? And really, we have all this data. How do we use that going forward? Well, Jordan, with all that in mind, kind of that ownership idea, let's go up a level. Someone's, they're using reShift in their team, and now they have all this information. How does this help a leader or a manager to lead better in an organization?
Yeah. It's funny. So we have the iPad app where you can, do all these actions. And as a team lead, you can own those actions of checklists. And we have, we named it the leader portal, which is funny in this conversation. But that is kind of where you can go to view all of your reports. anything you do in reShift, whether it's breaks, these checklists that we're talking about. So let's say like, as a team lead, I've checked off all these items. I own this. My name's against this checklist. Like, if that disappears for the day, that doesn't help you accomplish that level 2 side of the ownership, where you are looking back and looking how you did. So we have a whole reporting system in our leader portal, where as a director, maybe in the upper level side of management, you can see what your leaders are accomplishing every single day, and you can track that against time. So you could see the last 3 months of, how many times did Bobby complete all of his checklists? Did he do 100% of all the checklists the last 3 months? And so, one of the things that we want to help leaders focus on is looking back and reflecting, so that they can create those action plans to be like, okay, we need to like have a system for making sure we get those checklists done. Or like, if you're training Bobby to get his checklist done, you're just making sure he's hitting those 100% if he hasn't been. And so, we've built this whole reporting system where you can, pull those checklists, you can see how much they've been completed and like who owned each one. And so,
that's so good.
Really helping with that ownership concept. And
I can see from a leadership standpoint how that would give a manager or a supervisor in that role some really helpful leadership opportunities. So you mentioned accountability, like I can go to Bobby and talk to him about and have a way to encourage or guide or correct that individual. But also I hear in there some like this idea of transparency, or even building trust. Like, I might have an opinion about how someone's performing, but then I look at the data and realize, wow, they're nailing 100%. And so it might help improve my view of a team member. That it's a more truthful maybe picture of what's happening. And I would imagine, though, there would be a need to kind of audit. Like, yes, the checklist says got it done, but why are we still having these? There's a disconnect because we're still, this item is never clean, but it says it's being cleaned. So let's go and audit what's going on in that moment. So we create a kind of a transparency, accountability opportunity there, but also for that manager, like you said, to be able to reflect and think a little bit higher on the business horizon. This is one of the concepts we talk about too, is what view of the business do you have? Is it this, down at your toes view? Is it kind of out a little ways out? Or is it a higher view? And so this helps a manager kind of get their eyes up on the business a few inches to see a little bit higher business horizon, so that they can go to their leader and say, here's what my team has done. And so they have true numbers. I love that.
Yeah. I think it really just helps, like, as an emerging leader, you can kind of like see how you fit in the business and like what you're doing to contribute to that success. And I think there's just a lot of cool things to grow as an emerging leader in that area and do that. So
you're putting easier tools in their hands. And so that's why I love when I heard, of course, I enjoyed getting to know as a person, but I also loved what you've been able to do for teams that you're working with, and just solving some real challenges that they're facing, and just making it. I mean, I can't tell you how many organizations I've talked to, and when I dive into their systems, I find out when systems are like, that's where the game is won or lost, right? And I find out that all of their systems are still on paper, which there's nothing wrong with paper, but it's a lot harder to analyze paper than what you're talking about, and having this trend line that you can look at.
Yeah, and I think like as a business owner, as a leader, you're always trying to look back to like improve and get better and figure out like how you get better. And it's like the concept we talked about earlier of, you can't can't manage what you don't measure. And so like measuring those things helps you like illuminate like where you have issues, or like where like maybe there are things that you could get better at, because there's always something to get better at.
Always, and especially in the technology world, right?
Yeah.
So speaking of getting better, what are some features and things that you're hoping to incorporate going forward? What are your next steps?
Yeah. No, I had talked about a little bit at the beginning. We're definitely looking to, we'll be moving towards kind of that training world, onboarding and training, and being able to, as you're a leader in the business, like how do you get from, a team lead to that next step in your journey. And so we're going to be kind of building out systems to where you can track that and you can know where you stand. And that kind of directly plays into like everything you're doing. I always talk about the reShift, like we're here for frontline teams, for people on their feet. So we want to build things in a way that works for them. And so, we'll be building out kind of systems for other restaurants and organizations to use to develop their leaders.
That's so good. So as you are working on that, are you talking about going more custom for each location, or are you looking at some of the trends that, kind of solve everybody's problem, or is it a mix? What does that look like going forward?
Yeah. I would say it's a mix. We, something that's cool about reShift is it's all templated. So you can create your own checklist templates that work for you. So we'll be doing the same thing with training, where it's like you can create, every restaurant maybe has a slightly different like training pipeline. And so you'll be able to create what that pipeline is. So yes, it will be probably more custom than not custom. And so, yeah, we're excited about, it's in the works right now. So.
That's amazing. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. And so we'll be watching for that as it rolls out. Jordan, thanks for taking time being on the show. I want to put this out for the world. I want people to meet you, get to know you a little bit, and hear about the great work that you're doing and helping solve problems. And so how can people connect with you most easily?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Jordan Annis. That's probably, the personal way to connect with me. But reShift, you can also go to reshiftapp.com and reach out to us there. We have our email on there. Would love to connect if anyone has any questions or just wants to talk. I really enjoyed our conversation here.
I did too. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you for listening to Build Your Culture Brand with Dr. Jay Rains. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. Visit our website at buildyourculturebrand.com for our free culture brand assessment. See you next time.